Hello.
Hi.
What's your name?
Bond. James Bond.
And how do you like your martini?
Non-alcoholic. Shall we start again with
No, I love this. Carry on. What's your real name?
David Swenson.
Hello, David Swenson. And where did you grow up and where do you live now?
I grew up in Houston, Texas. I was born there in 1956. Lived there until I was 16. I moved to California after that. I've lived many places around the world. Currently, I live with my wife. We go between Austin, Texas, and the island of Maui.
Nice. And what has been the predominant spiritual contemplative practice of your life?
You know, I don't know if I would define it as a spiritual practice or not, because we would have to define what is something that's spiritual. But I can tell you the things that have given me the greatest, confidence, or the tools that have been the greatest asset in my life. To my great fortune, I learned about yoga when I was only 13 years old in Texas, which was an odd thing, but it was due to my older brother, who was a surfer and heard about yoga when he was in California. And he came home with some yoga books, and from that we would study these books and practice in the park, and we felt something from it. There were no teachers, there were no yoga clothes, there was nothing like that. It was quite simple. The first book we ever had, I'd be surprised if you've heard of it, it's called Yoga, Youth, and Reincarnation by a man named Jess Stern. Not a lot of asanas in it. Then eventually BKS Iyengar came out with his book, Light on Yoga. We also had a book from Swami Satchidananda called Integral Yoga. So these books were what we used as a reference, and we would sit under a tree and practice them. And the neighbors called the police. It was so odd for people to do yoga in Texas at the time. We were growing our hair long that it disturbed their mind. They thought we were worshiping the devil. You know, when ultimately it was something that made us feel good. We liked to practice outdoors because it gave us a connection with nature. And I would say that was what my spiritual, if you will, feeling was coming from, this connection with nature. You could feel the breeze, you'd see your shadow on the earth, you see the trees moving, you're breathing and feeling like the earth is breathing with this wind, and I become part of that one thing. And it gave me some kind of an inner strength that I don't think I would have had I not done yoga. And to this day, I'm now 67 years old. I've never taken drugs, I've never had a drink of alcohol in my life. I have nothing against those things, but somehow the yoga gave me something. And that even my friends were always trying to get me high, or get me to drink, or get me to smoke pot, or eat mushrooms, or whatever. And I would see them the next day, and they didn't look like they felt that great. So I'd say, you know, I'm sure you had a great time, but it doesn't look like the result the next day is good. So yoga gets me high, man. So my brother and I, we used the yoga as our tool. And from that, it plugged into everything else we do, with surfing and living and relationships and traveling and finding my way in India and eventually teaching yoga, which was not something I ever thought about.
And so this is like really great. So early on, you had this just innate feel of something connecting you to something bigger.
Yes, it was a feeling. I will say also, I give a lot of credit to whatever good qualities I might have to my parents. I credit them for that because of the environment they raised us in. They taught their children to be independent-minded, to think in a unique way, and to live our life in pursuit of our dreams. You know? And they didn't put pressure on us. Of course, they wanted us to be able to support ourselves and do those things. It wasn't like we just could do anything we want. But there was an environment where they fostered this creativity and a feeling of exploration. And when I found the yoga, it was this avenue that gave me this feeling. And it's hard to say, was it a spiritual feeling? I don't know. I don't even know exactly how to define something that is spiritual. Yeah.
There was a point in your life when you did go look into that spiritual nature, when you went and practiced took outside of Ashtanga, which you're known for, more with the kind of Bhakti tradition. Was that something you were searching for?
So in the Ashtanga tradition, there are these sequences. They're linear sequences. It's like learning martial artist, and you get through these different forms or katas, or a dancer learning the Nutcracker Ballet and the different famous ballets, and you learn them, and you're looking for something more. Yeah? So I got through every series of Ashtanga by 1977, including the pranayamas, all of the series. And that left me wondering, because at first we're entertained. We think it's going to be in the next series. If I just get through this one and this one, then I'm going to have some epiphany, and the heavens will open, and I'll get all of this information. Well, what happened is it just created all these questions. Oh, what am I doing? It's supposed to be the 8 limbs. I'm just doing asanas and pranayama. Where's the rest of it? Where all this spiritual thing, you know? There's that word. I didn't even think of it as spiritual. I just thought there's something more. What about the pratyahara, dana, dhyana, samadhi? What's that about? And I went on a quest. So I moved from doing asanas to I kept practicing them. However, I was looking elsewhere for something more. I studied St. Francis of Assisi. I memorized writings. I meditated. I fasted. I went to the Esoteric Philosophy Center in Houston, Texas. I studied palmistry and astrology and past life regressions. Once when fasting, I ate nothing but grapes and grape juice for 40 days. It's called the grape cure. It totally works. I don't like grapes anymore. But it was this cleansing thing. After that grape fast, I ended up in a Hari Krishna temple because they have free food. And they had answers to all these questions I was looking for. And they backed it up with traditional scriptural writings. And I'm the kind of person, if I'm going to do something, I'm all in. I'm not going to do something halfway. So I became a Hari Krishna, shaved my head, committed to their regulative principles of chanting 2 hours a day on my japa beads, getting up in the wee hours. I had a spiritual name. I was celibate. I lived like a monk, for 5 years. Traveled all over the world, helped to open temples in Asia and all of these things. Then once, at some point, I was back in Houston, and I was on the street doing what I called the Hari Krishna two-step. We were on the streets chanting. My mother comes up. And now we were like people repellents at this point, because nobody wants to come near us. We're trying to give out books, and people are just like, whoa. My mom walks up, says, oh, honey, no one will take one of those from you. Give me one. And she takes a book. When I went back to the temple that day, I was getting yelled at because I didn't collect enough money. And somehow there's this weird dichotomy. I'm looking, oh, wait a minute. My mom, my parents, they're not wearing robes. They're not chanting. But no matter what crazy things I've done in my life, they exhibit unconditional love. They always display to us as their children that they love us with open arms and open hearts unconditionally. And in this spiritual community where I lived, I started looking around and say, well, some people are mean, some are nice, some are egotistical, some are humble, some are spiritual, some are mundane. It seems like I have the same chance for spiritual growth out on the streets of the world as I do within this religion, and I left. Now, I had renounced my asana practice during that time because I was told the asanas were maya and illusion would attach me to the material world. So I left there. I secretly started doing my asanas again, but I was still a little bewildered, and there was a moment where it was a bit like, bah, humbug, searching for all this stuff. I just need to get a job. I need to do something. So I became an art dealer, because as the Hari Krishnas, ultimately for 5 years, they taught me to sell stuff. And so I opened an art gallery in Texas. And that was a little dry, but it was okay, just trying to make a living. Then I went to Hawaii, to Maui, and got a job in an art gallery there. And Nancy Gilgoff and David Williams, my first Ashtanga teachers that I met in 1973 in California, they had moved to Hawaii. And so Nancy was there. I started going back to classes with her, and it felt great. I was just like, I'm back home. She brought Pattabhi Joyce to Maui. It was 1989. I hadn't seen him for 12 years. And she brought me to class that first day. and he didn't recognize me. And of course, I used to have this long hair. I looked different. So the next day I was waiting for drop backs, and he touched my body as I was going into a back bend. Oh, David Swenson, he remembers. It's like the touch reminded him of who I was. And he looked at me and says, Hari Krishna, Hare Ram, and he laughed. And I was back home. It was interesting. It was like almost like the novel by Paulo Coelho called The Alchemist. I was searching all over for the world, and I realized I ended up right back where I started on my mat. It was in my own backyard. Everything I'd been looking for I already had. Pattabhi Jois only ever said, do your practice. I had all these epiphanies going off in my mind like fireworks. That spirituality is not determined by the practice. I've had people say, oh, I don't do physical yoga anymore, I do spiritual yoga. I say, oh, what's that? I do a lot of chanting. I'm like, fantastic. Is everyone that chants spiritual? Wasn't my experience. I was around people that chanted from sun up to sundown and in their sleep, yeah? People can chant like someone doing push-ups. And asana is no more nor less spiritual than something else. Spirituality is not determined by the practice. Rather, spirituality is determined by the focus, the intent, and the action of the practitioner. And I was always looking for this mystical guru, this person, and the other realization I had is, well, the practice is the guru, is not a person. Our great teachers, all of them, the main duty of a teacher is to encourage and to inspire and to facilitate a practice, whatever that practice is. That nourishment and understanding comes from within the confines of this practice, which nurtures us. It's like fertilizing the earth and then putting seeds in there that will grow. Now, the more practice we do, we have to be a little more aware of what the seeds are planting, because practice creates fertility. That's all that practice does. You learn advanced series of Ashtanga, great, you're becoming fertile. You can sit for an hour in meditation, you're fertile. You've learned Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and all this other stuff, you've created fertility. The seeds we drop into that fertile earth will determine our maturity of understanding. What's going to happen if we do a ton of practice, create this fertile earth, and drop a few ego seeds in there? They're going to go bigger than the average person. The more practice we do, the more cautious and aware we have to be as to what are the seeds we're planting in our garden. So yes, I went on this quest, but ended up coming right back. The practice had not changed. What changed? The lenses through which I view it now. The potential for all growth is right there.
There's a sense as you're talking, a sense of maturity that happens through practice as you go through the process. And I was drawn to something like, almost like after you'd gone in deep into the kind of the bhakti, the Hari Krishna stuff, and you come back and almost Pattabhi Jois laughed at you, and it was the laugh that draws you back. There's almost like a self-realization there that this is it.
I won't say that he laughed at me. He was just entertained, and in some ways I feel like he respected it, because I was out there, I was sincere, I was looking for the meaning of something.
Yeah.
You know? And hopefully we keep learning. Someone once asked me, they said, David, are you enlightened? My standard response to that question is, if I am, it's a big disappointment.
I think there's something about practicing for a long period of time, though, which I'm really interested with you about, in this idea of mini realizations. Like, you had to do all that kind of work, internal work, which you thought was really spiritual and proper, to come back to go, oh, this is it. And that was a realization that you could have had right at the beginning. But it's the maturity of practice, of going in there to take it away and to say it's really actually quite simple.
This practice is a tool, and what we do with it determines our maturity, right? And advancement is not determined by how many series we get through or how many asanas. It's what we do with that good juice we got for the rest of the day. How do we interact with the world around us and the environment around us? That will determine the greater picture of our true understanding, or self-realization, if you will. When you
look at all of those things that you did, like palmistry and like the great, do you feel that like now, I mean, you did them, but there's a ripple of everything you
We
learned
are
then.
all products of everything we've done in our life. Nothing is ever lost. I learned so much by being a Hari Krishna. I had deep experiences, but I also learned the pitfalls of power, you know. But I learned things by doing business. I've learned things by chanting. I learned things by studying palmistry and astrology. And all those things are wonderful. For many people, that is their whole path. I still have dear friends that are still Hari Krishnas that joined around the same time as me. I saw them recently. It's fantastic. We each have our journey. Some people, the first step they take just leads them on a straightaway path. For many of us, it's like this, right? It's circuitous. In our search for meaning, there's ups, downs, right, left, fall off a cliff, climb back up, fall off another cliff, dust yourself off, keep moving. And we're slowly evolving, hopefully, and learning from the mistakes and the mishaps. Later we can look back and go, oh, that was a good learning moment. But in the time that it's happening, it's not always pleasant. It's a real drag, right? Because some of the greatest growth potential comes in times of struggle and stress and distress, you know? Later we realize, wow, I grew a lot from that because I was able to process and get through and become stronger. You know?
Do you think that's, like, if you would stop now and reflect on your years of practice, would you think that's one of the biggest gifts that it's given you?
I don't know what my life would be had I not practiced. Maybe it would be the same, right? It's a question I can't answer. Like, what would my life have been had I not done yoga? Maybe I would have ended up in the same place, you know? But I'll say that it's still a tool, it's a companion that's been with me for over 50 years, and it's comforting to know it's there. And I feel like life is easier with practice than without it. Yeah, but I keep it simple. My expectations are that it's a tool. And I'm so grateful to have this tool. Without it, wow, life is harder. It's why many people, they're just going to turn to drugs or whatever because they don't have something that's going to help, right? To relieve some of this stress and pain and anxiety.
So as we finish, what would you say is one thing that you've learned about yourself or through all these years that you'd like to share with others?
Much of our experience in life shall be determined by how we choose to perceive the situation we are in. Yeah. It's our God-given right to feel bad about ourselves if we want to. And sometimes it's okay, right? When bad things are happening, yeah, you should feel bad. But we can also shift our mindset and find a positive way forward, even if that means stepping into the unknown, which is a frightening thing. Yeah. And so I would say that mistakes are highly underrated. If we're so petrified of making a mistake, we might miss the opportunity for the magic that could potentially occur. There's a joke, how do you make God laugh? You tell him your plans. So many times we have a plan and we're seeing this plan in a linear fashion. It starts here, I drive down this road and there's the end, but rarely does anything in life go that way. And sometimes it can, and sometimes it's necessary to hold on to a direction. But there are instances where if we hold on too tightly to our perception of where this road should lead us, we miss the opportunity for something far greater and grander than we could have ever perceived in our imagination. And that magic occurs when we enter the unknown. Now, we're not always lucky and get magic. Sometimes you get messy stuff. But ultimately, the things in my life that have had the greatest impact and depth are moments where I've encountered people and things and places that I had not planned, that happened because I was stepped out of the norm, because I was not the fish going with the flow. I was somehow moving against the current that was pushing me back. I found a way to move forward and discovered things that just blew my mind, and it continues to happen like that. We should remain curious like a child. If you've ever been around someone that thinks they know it all, They're a real drag to be around. The moment we think we know everything, we've had sealed our container, and so there's no more potential knowledge possible. So remain curious, remain excited. Questions are great. Answers are overrated. Questions are where the juice is. I found answers to some of the questions I was seeking, and I realized that honestly, the greatest answers should create 3 new questions. Yeah? So that by thinking that it's just an end, no. The word question contains the word quest. By feeling a bit uncertain about what's next is good. That keeps us growing, looking, striving, and wanting to improve.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bond.
Thank you very much, Scott. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, man.
Thanks.